alchemical salts, al being student and chemet the old name for the night. Just for those who don't know.
So is it that you want to become orange, or do you want to become...
My favourite Sunday.
Do you want to become pink, or is it... you want
I think
to become
flamingo
mummified?
pink is a nice colour. Flamingo pink is a nice colour. Well, I think permanent mummification means that you don't have to worry about death, do you? Yeah, the living,
I guess so.
impediment of implementation, imbibement of plasmoids.
Yes.
That's why those shrimp can live on those black smokers at 1,000 degrees with immunity and live in those hot lakes with no shade.
Yes.
Symbiotic relationship with the plasmoids.
Right. Just give it a little bit of chance for people to come into the room.
Was it Harry Crate, Tammy Crate, Corky?
So we've got Casey the Cat on YouTube, DIY Projects with Chalxus, Crypto Calchemist, and John Hoddle 29. So we've got some people coming on YouTube. If you want to ask questions on YouTube, then fire away. I'll try and bring them to people that are in the room. And so on. Hi, Nick Knock. Okay. Right, just give it a few more minutes. So Malcolm, do you want to talk about what's happened in North Carolina this week with Phil Dubois?
Yeah, I don't know. Is Phil online? Does he
I
join
don't
us?
know. I can see. So Elliot just wants to clarify that he thinks that the designer was clueless as to the significance of the Sarah, and maybe just got lucky that he chose that symbol with respect to Tesla, given the fact that it's the most important part of ball lightning. So yeah, I agree, Elliot. I agree. So hi, Gillo Vellecci. Hi, Luke Threadgold on YouTube, and Mary Ekman. Hi from Sweden. Yes, our Nordic friends up there. So okay, so if you don't want to talk about that for the minute, Malcolm, do you want to talk about what's happened with respect to the thunderstorm generators that are going to go out and have already been sent out to independent parties? So you've got your patent in, as I understand it, right? So there's an open source
patent application, Bob. Let's be correct. Yes,
very good, Malcolm. Okay,
You're
yes. So basically, there's an open source one out there, which was essentially the one that was demonstrated in India and was demonstrated in Zurich. And there's been quite a few modifications and changes over the last several months, as I understand it, Malcolm. And that you placed a patent there, and the idea of placing the patent is so that someone couldn't patent it and lock you out of making these things, right?
Yeah, because open source is thwarted if you don't have patent protection to stop people ring fencing it and actually stop the inventor from making the invention.
I mean, the reality is it's highly unlikely that most people that would want one of these things would want to do all the development to get it from its current prototype phase to a thing that you can literally bolt onto your model of a car or whatever. And even if they could, would they be able to make it cheaper than you could mass produce it than the one that you're making for, because it's not a simple thing to make. It might look like a couple of pieces of pipe, but
it's deceptively simple. It is simple, but it's deceptively simple.
Yes.
So it's the devil's in the detail, as they say. And but going through, because I just waiting Phil come on, because I just want to thank him for, he did the work in India, as everyone may know. Phil together the machine there with myself. He stayed there for 3 months. He did some great work with the government people there and representatives of the Navy, Com Carpenter, and the Admiral, as you know, Shakar. So he's been a great supporter, and he came and supported us with the testing in North Carolina. That testing, I did send a copy of that testing through to you today, actually, a couple of the results. But to go back to your question, this is a big push. And just so that everyone, I know everyone's been frustrated, including yourself and myself, about not getting out those things to the people that want to test them. The problem has been twofold. One is we wanted to get the patents in first and get them registered. So before we start distributing them.
Patent
now they have been,
Malcolm.
and we've got
patent applications.
Patent application. Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you. All corrections gratefully received. Yeah. So as humble soul. So we all see dimly and in part, some more dimly than others, but
barely at all, mate.
So barely at all, sometimes. So anyway.
So can I just say,
yes,
Malcolm, just whilst he's here, I can see that Martin Kemp is on the live call here with us. So that's Martin Kemp with the Aurora Borealis behind him, and he is one of the pair that are going to do the experiments in Coventry, as I understand it. So Martin, in reasonably short order, you should receive your super stubby. That's in theory, right, Malcolm?
Well, yeah, but the practice has been, and I can rely on this performance. We now have 4 thunderstorm generators in the United States. One is in New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had the Tesla Tech conference, which was my first outing after spending 3 months with Randall Carlson doing the slide presentation and organizing my information. That was the first outing. Tesla Tech was a big deal. Phil Dubois helped us at Tesla Tech put that together. And of course, as you know, he joined us in India and is now in North Carolina, where there's currently in North Carolina, there's 2 functioning thunderstorm generators. And we do have another one now just on its way to Houston, Texas. So there'll be actually, and one of those out of the 4 is going to find its way to your friend Bob in California. Now, Bob was there supporting us this last week with a group that's a multi-billion-dollar company that's very interested in sort of taking on board this, and that's really accelerated since the meetings that we had there. I've been working all weekend supplying information, and it's really taken off. So basically. There's another 4 that Bob's identified with the working groups in I think Norway and Netherlands, I think, and obviously I mentioned California, but that's covered with I think the one we got there already, and the Coventry group, and I think there's another one, wasn't there? Or was that the 4, Bob?
There's my fellow MFMP director, Alan Goldwater in California. He has a process mass spectrometer, so we can look up to mass 79, I think it is, during the actual running of the device in the gases. And also, of course, he has also an SEM. He's an engine expert, being the head of the US Norton Motorbike Owners Club, and he regularly builds and rebuilds engines, and he has lathes and TIG welders and everything necessary. He's also very familiar with putting together vacuum equipment in his lab. So I think he's an ideal person. And then we have some more independent people that we will support, like Martin Kemp there, and obviously Henk Urian and Tony Yaboni in Holland. And then we have this other group, which are Scandinavian based. I think there's 4 or 5 in the team. They are retired professors or heads of engineering or design engineering, and they have agreed to do this fully openly, independently, and share the raw data, as is a requirement for all of the teams that will be doing explorations of the technology. And whatever the data is what it is. And so I'm quite excited about the sort of spread of the units. Of course, you've had some in India, you've had some in the Maldives in the past, and in Australia, and also in Thailand. I think you're probably going to be sending some back to there in the next period. I don't know when that will be, but I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, it'll be in this. There's the current round that we've sent, that's 4 that are currently operational in the US, or can be operational. I think they're being helped up as we speak, probably. But certainly, I think there may be another demonstration that Phil was having today. I'm not quite sure, in North Carolina. But it's gone very well. And as I said, we had the idea that we had the other 4 which cover your guys, and then after that, that's out of, we're doing them in batches of 6. So that's just the best sort of, I think, compromise with our welder. And so then we'll go on to the next batch of 6, and then the next batch of 6. I suspect we're talking about anywhere 2 to 4 a month. I'm not quite sure, depending on the availability of the annealing. George Lash has supported us, very well, as you know. He was at the demonstration that you were at this week, and provided all of the professional thermocouples, which gave us the bottom sphere, which is big news for everyone, or it's just to me because I'd seen it visually. But the bottom sphere, we did get a temperature reading around about, I think, 530, 540, something like that, degrees C on bottom sphere, whereas the outside's 160 degrees to 200 degrees. The inside is 540, which you could tell from the color code, the cherry red, that it was around there anyway, because you knew it was hot. But to see that in the bottom sphere, we're now going to contrive a device, a pipe or something coming in from the North Pole, because we can now do that, or actually maybe to the side, because I think the North Pole might be a bit problematic. But anyway, so that we'll have a tube that we can actually get the temperature of the inside, because that's a vacuum side, so it's a bit more difficult. But the inside sphere, which before, when I had a different design, I actually drilled a hole in and looked inside, and it was like bright cherry red. So according to that, it was around about 600 to 800 degrees, or within
and
that
as
range.
I've said before, when you get up to sort of 600, 650 degrees and you have iron in play, you have thermocatalytic splitting of water into hydrogen and oxygen. So there's that. So I'm just going to ask if there's people that have specific questions for Malcolm, for instance, on YouTube, if they could write a big Q in a capital letter. And then, so Elliot says, Malcolm, could you explain a bit about the difference between the stubby, turbo stubby, and standard build with regards to efficiency and effectiveness, etc.?
Yeah, good question. I love good questions. They invite good answers. The idea is that the extent in the initial test work, which is sort of, it's my own private joke that everyone thinks I'm trying to make it work, and I've been trying for the last 8 years to make it work and not destroy my equipment. So that is dumb it down. So originally the 24-inch length was to dumb it down to make it cooler, but it's directly related to the length of that joining tube between the 432, say, like on the other one, obviously it's 144 inches. And when you've got the 24-inch sphere and the 18-inch sphere and the 12-inch sphere on the big industrial sort of, big generators. But on the small devices, which is a 432, and that's my thing, that 432 is the radius of the sun, and the joining tube, the size of it and the length of it. Now this here goes. The longer the tube, if you talk about flux, if you imagine, in my mind, the sphere can work by itself as a north and south pole in the same sphere, or you can separate it into 2 spheres, which isolates them a bit more and makes them more coherent with time in my mind. So, and that joining tube now on the super stubby, or actually turbo stubby, is actually 2 inches, and that gives us the best, and we also the best temperatures, but we also shortened it to 2 inches, which increases the temperature, but compensated for that. And it's an interesting compensation, because this gives you a metric that you can work with. By reducing it from 24 inches to 2 inches, all right, we then increased the size of the pipe from 1 inch outside diameter on a sort of 1.5 mil pipe to 1 inch inside diameter on a 3 mil pipe. 3 mil made it easier to weld, and that was the welder's preference. My preference is the thinner, the better the resonance, but then you want a good weld, and you want it to anneal properly, and you want it to last. So basically, that's why we did the 3 mil. But the inside tube was OD half an inch, so the ID was about 3/8 or 6/16. Yeah. So basically, the point is that we by making it bigger spacing, we reduced the temperature deliberately so as we could not overheat or overdrive the system. I'm trying to keep our flux loops within the cavity between so that we maintain the energy in the system and keep the flux loops within the cavity between the 4-inch and 3-inch spheres. Now, Bob, one thing that jumped into my mind, which is so fantastic, you're just doing that thing, like with the Tesla logo. Well, look at that. It's showing the curve of our spheres, right? And exactly the geometry. If you look at those balls that we had, and we should have had them in the presentation, but the Tesla balls you just buy for amusement or whatever, it's exactly the same shape as the plasma coming off one and coming onto the other. Exactly the same shape.
Maybe. I'll just add a couple of points. I'll add a couple of points to what you said in terms of. So, firstly, it allows for a higher temperature to allow thermocatalytic splitting, but a more stable structure. I identified that potentially both the big industrial unit and the small unit, which had been popped at the end, was due to the very clear thermal differential between the long pipe in the center and the outer pipe. There is a large temperature differential, and in the small unit for the small generators, that corresponded to about a 6 millimeter differential in change of length during the operating device. And so if there's any weld there, it's going to pop that or damage that. So this much smaller device has much less.
I think it's
yeah.
But I think the plasmoids are somehow assisting with electromagnetic fields.
Maybe, but if you've got something
to make it perfect, you know what I mean? To make it symmetrical. Yeah.
Well, maybe, but if you've got something that's very much longer than the other thing during different parts of the cycle, it's going to have an issue.
Yes.
And then the other thing is it actually makes it fit within those generators, and it'll make it much easier to fit in a car. So it has not only designed for manufacturer implications, designed for function applications or benefits, it also makes it practical for implementation as well. So there's many reasons. So there's actually quite a fefew questions on YouTube, which I'll ask, and then we'll ask some people in the room. So Kooky Culture says, this I've partially answered that. It says, what data have we collected on the TSG regarding degradation or weak points over prolonged periods of running, if any? Can they be engineered out? I think this is the similar thing to, if I change it back to the group view here. I think essentially it's similar to Benjamin Huang. Benjamin Huang has solved his collapsing pipe problem by making the size of his copper pipes, or rather the thickness, thicker. Yeah, the wall thickness. And we've seen that these structures can burrow in, but if they're only 20 microns, they basically typically stop about half of their structure size as they're burrowing in. So they're only able to burrow into 10 microns. They can open up cracks if they all work on the same area, but it's statistics, isn't it? And then what you have is they are able to, with the tornadic beam and with their outside, they're able to take off about 100 nanometers to 200 nanometers of material, and a little bit more with the tornadic beam. But if you imagine that it's all statistics, these things are not necessarily all going to go and work on the same place, and they're all not going to, and the other thing that I've identified is that carbon is very good at preventing these things from working. And what happens when they blow up is they spill a load of carbon everywhere. So you almost have a pacification. They pacify the environment they're in. by dumping carbon onto the metal. So in part, they solve the problem that they create in terms of degradation of the reactor. Obviously, long-term testing, both with Bindra&Hang's water cavitation system and with Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generator, will answer these questions. And, you know, they're both effectively at different prototype states. So I hope that answers your question there.
Well, Bob, the thing is that with those cuts that we've now done in it, you know, we cut it, the stainless steel. It's absolutely, besides that tiny surface effect you're talking about, and let's talk about it, it's about the width of your hair.
No, it's less than the width. That's width of your hair is like 75
I know,
plus microns.
But I'm just trying to say, even if that was that, you know, say the width of your hair, right? Less than that, a lot less than that, maybe a 20th, 100th.
If you've got 100 micron, if you've got 100 micron structure, it will bury itself, let's say 50 microns into the material. So, you know.
So anyway, your hair's 100, but my point was that there's no, when we did the cutting, there's 500 hours on that machine. There was no sign in the stainless steel at all, anywhere we cut it. And you can ask Phil this, it was all intact. It's only that, so there's no sign at all on the inside or the outside of anything other than a surface effect.
Certainly nothing you could see with the naked eye, and nothing within that 500 time that actually caused structural problems. I think it's more a thermal mechanical effect which is being solved by making these stubbies. And the stubbies can work. Is it correct in saying that you believe that the stubbies will work on the big generators as well? Like it just scaled up?
Absolutely. In fact, with the people we met this week, I sort of, because we were looking at huge size vacuum cabinets that it would take 2.5 years to build, simply put in the 144-inch joiner with the two 24-inch spheres, and now it's just two 24-inch spheres and a 12-inch joiner. We've changed our dynamic. Now we don't have to wait for 2.5 years to get
it's a massively improving the manufacturing on the 400 kilowatt generators.
Correct.
Okay, so we've got a question here for Bendel. Does static electricity play any part in your technology?
Well, Bob's the expert in the definition.
Yeah, absolutely it does. That's William Schwant.
Superior knowledge.
Yeah. So yes, it does. Evan Howell says, Q, have you noticed performance variations or temperature fluctuations when the device is on and functioning in different geographic locations? So does it work differently in different geographic locations?
Yeah, again, I'll just repeat Bob's observation on this, is that the test in Thailand and the Maldives had a high humidity and we had better results.
Yeah, so I think with the right bubbler working in the right way, you deal with the humidity argument. But you also have temperature is different on a baseline there, and temperature changes everything. And I've spoken to Malcolm about this, that there are standing waves on the sphere. There are standing waves on the inner sphere. These are vibrational modes. Right, and we've already identified when you get a standing wave coming back on itself perfectly, you get resonant nodes, and this is where these kind of effects occur. That also occurs in the body of the gas, and we call this ion acoustic waves. And so you'll get standing waves in there. All of those things change with temperature. Now, it could take longer to get going. It could be easier to get going. I don't know, in different zones. But even a normal car will be more efficient in a colder climate because the air is denser and it has more oxygen in it. So, you know, these factors, there will be some there. Now, is what the actual difference is, you know, will change over time, I think. Okay, so...
It's an interesting point there, Bob, is that the lowest temperatures that I had, like we were getting minus 85 degrees C going into the bottom, which is crazy stuff, and minus 40 coming out the top of the thunderstorm generator with the initial models. And so, you know, in the colder climates, we don't seem to be seeing that. Interesting.
Yeah. These things will all come out in the wash with lots of independent people testing them. one in California and one in Norway. I think it's going to be a nice variation of temperatures and humidity.
So we need someone in someone in Greenland can give a volunteer. Anyone in Greenland, anyone in the Arctic Circle, be welcome. Alaska, anyone living near
in the shadow of the Welsh mountains. I think Martin Kemp can deal with the wet environment. Right, Martin?
But the other thing to point out is that with the original question, I think there's a concept in my mind that we've got the two spheres represent a north and a south pole, where the North Pole is expelling and the South Pole is imploding into itself, the female, southern hemisphere female. But it's interesting that there seems to be a concept here, because the super stubby works so well and we did it scientifically. We went down from like the 24 inches down to 12, down to 8, down to then down to the 3, and then down to 2. So we had 4, 3, 4, and in the inside it was 3, 4, 3, and then we went down to super stubby. There's a concept that by making the north-south poles closer together, you sort of got the flux loops tighter. You know what I mean? It's just a greater density of flux.
I think in time, if this all pans out, which, maybe it won't, maybe it will be, you've got to try. And that's one thing I respect about you, Malcolm. You're actually trying to do something rather than talking about it. I'm
very trying.
Well,
apparently.
There's that too. Implementation and trying to find a way to navigate through all the challenges that presents. All right, I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but there's a question, and it's from Adonius, and he says, do you have any predictions when these will be ubiquitous throughout all of civilization? I don't exactly know what you mean by these, but systems that use these, well, firstly, Ken Shoulders says, exotic vacuum objects are literally ubiquitous. I would tend to agree with that. If you believe that they are, that charge clusters are effectively, and EVOs are essentially at their base level, static electricity, that is essentially ubiquitous. Cavitation is obviously there wherever there's water and shear forces. You have ball lightning at the front of every lightning bolt. We've lived with these things all of our life. It's just potentially people in the past, potentially before the cataclysm, 11,700 years ago, the Younger Dryas or whatever it is, potentially they understood how to use this force of nature, and they understood what it was and how to, and possibly with very simple apparatus. I often say with more time, I've written a shorter letter, or if I spent 5 weeks, I could give you my presentation that normally takes 3 hours. I could probably give you it in 20 minutes, but I'd take 5 weeks to do it. And you'd have to wait another 10 years before I got to where I am now. So, which is not helping anyone. So, so basically, Benjamin Huang has a system that is, he can make every day of the week and it produces 30% over unity. I don't think we are going to see, well, maybe we see in our lifetimes an over unity, maybe 10% more thermal heat out than electricity into the reactor in a tokamak fusion reactor. Will we ever see anything more than that? I don't believe so. And I think if we do, it will just destroy the reactor, as I've said, because the structure that they're building is this structure. And when it gets really working, it's just going to destroy the environment around it.
Well, it's the anti Victor Schaussberg, isn't it? It's not observing.
Well, it's smashing things together and hoping they'll get.
It's ignore and completely work against nature. That's explosive.
Well, I mean, it's they're trying to fuse, but they're doing it in a way that is smashing balls together, rather than using this beautiful creative force. Now, someone's asking here. They ask about the left-hand vortex and the right-hand vortex. Is that one creating force and one destroying force? I'll take a stab at that. Firstly, I believe that we're in a left-handed universe. I believe there's a mirrorverse, which is the right-handed universe, which is largely comprised of antimatter. That was the original separation event that created our two universes. I think in this universe you can create antimatter. We know you can create antimatter, and that is right chirality. When you bring a antineutrino and a neutrino together, or you bring a electron and a positron together, they will annihilate and just emit vibrations in the ether that you call a photon. And so there we go. So in part, what you're doing is in these systems, you're unwinding the matter, you're getting it into a prima materia state. And in our universe, because the whole universe is left chirality, it forces it to reorganize into left chiral matter. I imagine if you took whatever matter is in the mirrorverse and you unwound it by using left chirality vortex and it became prima materia, when it pops out of this little mini universe, it would be reassembled by the right chirality forces in that mirrorverse. And so, yeah, you're deconstructing the matter and you're reconstructing it. At some level, what you're doing is, in my view, you're taking the carbon in potentially, you're assembling because you're doing creative forces in these structures, and you are assembling neutrons, and you're making heavier elements in the form of heavier isotopes of carbon, nitrogen and oxygen, and let's say up to sulfur and iron, calcium. We shall see when with the data coming in the coming weeks. Okay. Did you want to say something about the left-right vortex, Malcolm?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to basics. The fundamental is there's no straight lines in the universe. Every line's just a curve, and every curve's part of a spiral, and every spiral has really two choices naturally. And this is where I could probably clarify my thing about modern society, is that in nature, it's not such thing as a straight line. Every line is a curve, every curve's part of a spiral, and every spiral is either imploding and concentrating force, or exploding and dissipating force. So basically the very primal, that's how I try and think of it, because in my model of the elements, I pondered for 7 years and built my model of the elements. There's only 24 things I could find to put on there that was everything knowable being known. That is crystal structure, frequency, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and the colors, rainbow colors. And so anyway, everything you can observe, including time in the universe, that we can see, put your finger on, or know of through its interaction with other things. So basically, I think that because of that, the really fundamental nature, and this is the thunderstorm generator, is that it's literally counteropposing those two forces. The exhaust gas is expanding. It's positively charged by going over air over metal as a positive charge. Plus, after the discharge of the plasmoids, they are not destroyed in the combustion chamber. They simply go from net negative charge, and when exposed to the plasma of the spark plug, then they discharge, and then you have the absorption of the net positive in my equation. Now, what I think happens, you can see it in my notes, that coming from the exhaust, that then with the water attracts the oxygen to it geometrically, and the oxygen comes in a sphere around it that attracts in and then creates a force multiplier, because you're multiplying by pulling in all the hydrogen exposing the oxygen. Then you're making it a net negative charge. Sorry, so pulling in all of the oxygen to the positive and then putting the positive to the outside. It makes it more positively charged in that exhaust stream. On the opposite happens on the inside, where you have the net negative charge plasmoid then attracting in the hydrogen and putting the oxygen to the outside, which is net negative, which is a geometric force multiplier. So therefore, the thunderstorm, in my thoughts, the thunderstorm is accelerated because you have these more concentrated charge, simply charge separation.
It's doing charge separation, which leads to the process manifesting. Yeah, so we've got
Yeah.
another question here. It says, are there any plans, this is by Nick Knock, are there any plans to test for nitrogen gas production or various isotopes in excess of normal air from the TSG? Yes, I can say that if Alan Goldwater is possible, if he's able to do tests, then we would be looking for that. I know that some of the other testing parties have mass spectrometers, gas mass spectrometers, and we will also be looking for nitrogen in the beamline sample that's been sent off. We managed to get 36. I managed to get 36 milligrams this time rather than 6. So we got 6 times the amount of material going to the beamline this time to look for nitrogen 15 over nitrogen 14, carbon 13 over carbon 12, sulfur 34 over sulfur 32, and oxygen 18 over oxygen 16. So don't know whether the nitrogen is in there, but we definitely do know that we have sulfur, oxygen, and carbon in there. So we might be able to see those.
I didn't give her a lot.
Sorry, what?
I gave her a nice piece, but not a lot.
So Lithnick, do you want to speak? So
Yes. Hey.
Hi Lithnick. Yeah.
I think it was 2 weeks or 1 week ago when Malcolm said in chat that he had some big updates. He might have already said some of them already, though. But I think it was something to do with commercialization or production.
Do you want to take that, Malcolm? You had some big updates about commercialization or production, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a couple of big things happened or happening at the moment, still commercial in confidence, but I was excited about the both the move in the US with the parties there, getting those the thunderstorm generators to them for test work, which is a big move ahead. And also we have in certain different countries around the world, we certainly have agreements, MOUs on test work, industrial scale test work. And so all of that sort of crystallizing now in Asia as well. Specifically, we're looking at exciting things happening in South Korea and exciting things happening in India and exciting things happening obviously with the testing in the US and the testing here, but also with which is going to be about probably, we're looking at 25. That's where our goal is to have 25 units out there all around the world so that people can test the machine independently. But we wanted to get away from the problem of people making their own machines and not, like, the devil's in the detail. The transitions have to be at 51.84 degrees. There has to be a very strict regime of treating the materials, properly, annealing them properly before, say, for example, the stainless steel, 304 stainless steel, annealing it properly, then hot spinning it, which the spin is important on that, which Bob's pointed out before.
I think, Malcolm, I think the point is you're trying to make is that you didn't want to have a scenario where it didn't work and because they didn't build it right. So by getting these units out to the testing parties, which is being built in the right way, then the largest source of error, other than vacuum leaks and the Venturi being wrong and those kind of aspects, the actual thunderstorm generator itself is built to spec, right?
Correct, yes, and properly annealed and properly transitioned.
Okay, so Elliot's saying I'm going to let Brian Richardson, because he's in the chat, before go back to the YouTube questions. And I know there's a question for me by Corky on a different subject, which I'll address before I go through those. So Brian, do you want to take the floor?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, by the way, like, you guys are doing great stuff. Love following both you guys' work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I had a quick question for you. It's related to something in your notes. I guess this is more fun than on topic of the thunderstorm generator, but One of the things in here you were mentioning, where is it? The propulsion, the laser. Let me see. I literally have your notes like right here. I don't know why I can't find it. Oh, all right. Well, it's my fault. I thought I had it pulled up, but I don't. But in your notes on your website, you're speaking to essentially having like a laser, I believe, push some type of propulsion device like a rocket or something you could launch using that at a resonant frequency. Does that make any sense?
I think what you're talking about is, well, there's two aspects to that. I thought you might have been talking about laser, and that goes back, I think, to Stanley Meyer's work. I think had a laser in his plasmoid gun, but specifically, and this is the big one, is that this goes back to the understanding of the vortices and how if you fire a plasmoid into a copper plate, which you can go to Ken Shoulder's work and see that, then it's really interesting because it's like a self-building gun. So you can imagine you fire the plasmoid in, now it's made its barrel. It then transmutes the elements, and the frequency at which, and the frequency being the amount of energy with it. If you pick the right energy, you can produce reliably the copper, 99.99% copper, into 75% gold and 25% copper alloy. Now, in that process, and that process is in my notes there, and I explain it in my HowTube, Malcolm. You can go and see my lecture series, which is like 15 lectures. But the idea is you have, so this self-making gun, it makes its own barrel, it goes down, effectively makes its own gunpowder, and with the transmutation of the elements, effectively makes its own bullets, and then it fires that outside the same hole, right? That's a thrust, right? So I pointed out, or, from, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and the biggest giant there at the moment, I think, in this context, besides acknowledging Bob's giant effort in the last 12 years to get all this together. But I think probably Bob would agree with me that Kenneth Radford Shoulders was really the hero in this. Do you agree, Bob?
I
Can you
would
say
say
something on that?
What Ken did most importantly is he translated the observations of John Hutchison into and the original plasmoid work of Bostic and Nardi, and the original sort of Lafferty book on arc vacuum discharges. He synthesized that with his own unique and capability to do plasma and vacuum experiments and to record what was going on into an understanding of the basic science. He quantified the 100,000 electrons to an ion capability carrying of these systems. But I think the most important thing that he did in all of this story is when he understood the significance of this and the fact that it was an oscillating monopole, a perfect oscillating monopole, and so forth, he found a way to apply for patents and ensure that they weren't locked up in secrecy orders. And by doing that, he showed exactly what you needed to do, but he also had the book out there. And then because they didn't lock up the patents, he was then able to explore it further and publish these beautiful little PDFs that he did in his own way at his own website until it was taken down 2 days after I made it public.
Naturally.
Thanks, Bob.
But all of the work was saved, all of the key work. And so in the same way, Malcolm has, when someone approached me to try and work with Malcolm, it was just like the umpteenth person that asked me to do that. But when I was sent the coherent matter traveling waves coming out of the reactor, I was forced to get involved. And so I said to Malcolm, I said, the only way I'm going to be able to help you, given the mandate of the project, is that you are open with this. and there was a bit of an umming and ahhing, and it caused problems for Malcolm, but that was done. We were open with it, and then he's had to toe this fine line, such that there is now protection being put in place, so people can't come in from the outside. And during that whole part of the development of the story, it was predicted that certain things would be found if it really was ball lightning, knowing from Matsumoto's work and from Ken Shoulders that both called it ball lightning and were both shut down when they referred to it being as called ball lightning, that it could transmute matter, that it had these certain signatures, and it turned out subsequently that it had those signatures. Very good. What a great book that is. This is a great book. Yes.
on you, Brian.
Yeah.
I love the guy that comes in with the good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we have, and I don't know if Phil Dubois was doing these experiments in India, and he had a moment of loss of faith, you might call it. And then he came over, and Malcolm gave him the really crummy job of sitting behind an angle grinder and cutting up the 24-inch sphere for a week.
Penance.
But, yeah. Well, what that meant is he could cut the sample from the source. He could package it himself into a container. He flew with it on in his own baggage, right? With which he was carrying in hand luggage. He then came to me. I didn't get to see what was in that. We went to the SEM. He took it out of the box. He took it out of the sample thing, gave it to me, and within 2 seconds, it was on the table of the SEM. We put it in, and we found Phil Dubois' balls.
Oh, wow.
So he saw end to end, and within seconds, we found one, and there was many on there.
Chain of custody, and now saying chain of custody is taking the same samples, a group of samples, to the US to really safe hands at the top of the tree.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be lost, and that was my fear. I think it's Bob's fear, is that there's so much suppression involved around this, and dark shadows that it's difficult to bring things out in the light, cleanly. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd say tapping into the vacuum and transmitting matter is a hard thing, but the hardest thing is getting this information out to people in a safe way for you guys, but also so that we can all kind of
alive is the hardest.
Yes, exactly.
Thank
you guys
keep
so much.
Breathing, Malcolm. Keep breathing.
Yep.
I mean, there are countless people that have mixed the fuel, or they've added water, or they've added excitation or new types of carburetors, and they've either created much higher efficiency or much cleaner burns. But there hasn't been a real understanding for what's going on in these almost always high vorticity-based systems. There's never been an understanding of what was underpinning a scientific basis for why these things either produce less emissions or produced more efficiency. The jury's still out until it's absolutely, we're absolutely certain from my point of view. But I've seen what a normal analyzer will do on various systems in many locations that have been built haphazardly right the way through to very cautiously being built. I still reserve that fact that there might be some moisture coming out, or some hydrogen, or something, or there's too much nitrogen being formed, or whatever. But everything's kind of moving in the right direction, which will support the claims of previous people. But in the case of the thunderstorm generator, compared to, for instance, the GEAT, it seems to be a really easy system once you've got the thunderstorm generator to get the system working, which it wasn't. It was famously difficult to get a GEAT working, although there was Thorsten Ludwig at the conference in Zurich, and there was the people that organized the conference who actually worked with Paul Pantone. They all got GEATs working to a degree, but they weren't, regularly easy to do for the general person. So, I think we're in a different place. And now it's a case of, they can't say it doesn't do anything, because it's clearly doing something, and it's doing the same thing that other things do that are known to transmute matter. right?
Right.
So we're in this weird zone now. It's kind of like I can see the thing in the sky, but is it going to fall out the sky?
Right. Yep.
So I'm hoping it doesn't fall out of the sky. But
Speaking of breathing, we're all kind of also holding our breath too.
Yeah. I mean, but all I can say, and I said this with all Malcolm's investors and potential investors in the room this week. I said, I'm independent. I'm just here to try and help. Is the mandate of the project. Now we think we understand what's going on. We could be wrong, but we think we do. And it looks like his system is doing it like other systems have done before. But it seems to be doing it simply. And I respect you supporting Malcolm through this, but it may not work out in the end. But good full credit for seeing this through, because it takes real balls and courage, to see these things through. So I don't. Do you have any other questions? Because I think Livnik wants to ask a question.
No, that was it. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah,
Well,
12 hours to you
Bob,
guys
I
for sure.
just wanted to finish off on the main question, which is about thrust. This is what I wanted to go back to propulsion and your laser thing, which was actually ejector from a self-styled barrel that a plasma is, or actually it's EVO is probably in fact Shamir is the term I like best. But anyway, you fire something in at Reactor and it fires itself out. I want to make about this just to give you metrics so you can understand. So I was in a meeting with the guy that held the patent for the F-35 fighter on behalf of Lockheed Martin. And basically I said to him what I'm saying to you now. I said, if you look at Ken Shoulder's work, 1 square inch, according to his calculations, would be 200,000 pounds of thrust, right? 200 pounds per square inch. If you take the equivalent for the F-35 fighter, you've got about 40,000 pounds of thrust to over 1,000 square inch. That's 5,000 times difference.
Yeah.
Right? Just think about that for a second, and then let's think about flying sources, right?
Yep.
Thrust and dynamics. I think you know where this is going.
Malcolm, I'm trying to toe a fine line here, not helping.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, loud and clear.
All right, Livnik, thank you very much for your contribution, Brian. Livnik, do you want to step in now?
Yes, so I read in the comments, Philip Mulholland had a question about running the Ethereum generator in a closed loop system. And I was wondering if you had done some testing on that yet.
Let's think. That's my NASA NDA.
Yeah, so that means you can't talk about it, I guess.
Right.
So hopefully I spoke about it without speaking about it.
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
Which theoretically would mean, completely theoretically, that if you were in a submarine or a spaceship and you happen to be breathing, right, and you wanted to keep breathing, then wouldn't it be a good idea if you had some machine that would actually turn the carbon dioxide into oxygen? Wouldn't that be a unique thing?
That would be very handy.
Maybe if you go to Mars and back.
Or if you run out of nitrogen and oxygen to make a breathable atmosphere, you could always hack off part of your arm and put it in.
Oh, the other thing too is, by the way, with the system, hypothetically, if you had a Mars spaceship, for example, then you wanted to go to the toilet, then that would actually recirculate through the bubbler. It would remove as a fuel the uric acid, and so basically you would clean all the water, including the condensate on the inside of your spaceship or inside of your submarine, the condensate, and then that would effectively clean it in the process. And this is the other thing for the thunderstorm generator. I don't think I want the audience to know. If you've got your machine, your car running on a thunderstorm generator, not only is it cleaning up the air from your engine, the air that it's sucking in is also being cleaned from the cars in front of you.
Right, yes.
Which is important.
So obviously with the geet, Paul Pantone, he used a small geet and then he fed the output from the small geet into a big geet. And that was one of his devices. There was various people that did recirculation. Of course, I haven't really discussed this with Malcolm, but I would like to see maybe fuel injection along with the moist water injection at that point, rather than coming in to the carburetor at that side. So actually injecting the fuel a little bit sooner in the over vortex, because that's kind of what was going on in the Geet. Is he was separating the fuel as well as adding the moisture in the actual vortex. And I wonder if that might improve things, because certainly some of the previous inventions that were, the people ended up dead, let's face it, before their time.
Engine, by the way. Not by the engine.
Not by the engine, no. They were kind of properly gasifying the fuel before it was injected into the engine. So I wonder if you can use some of those toroidal vortex forces to improve that part of the process for efficiency.
Well, probably. Yeah, well, as you know, we've got 3 engines at the moment. They're going to be running on the normal system, and then the new 3 we're making, the stands that we made and everything, are specifically for that test work, because I have done that before in Thailand, and it does work, and it eventually makes it a lot easier, because you just get rid of the carburetor altogether, or just put it down on the bubbler level, or have a direct fuel injection mode, because then you can have literally use Stanley Meyer's plasmoid gun, or a modern version of that, to enable more effective discharge of the plasmoids coming into the combustion chamber.
Okay, so I'm going to pick some questions out of YouTube here, if that's okay. If anyone else wants to speak within the call, the live call, can they raise their hand, please, and I'll grab you. So, so the next question here is: have there been any improvements or discoveries regarding tuning the cavitation chamber? I saw in your recent video that you were able to reach 0 parts per million on carbon monoxide, which is incredible. Can you reach it consistently? Can you? I think the carbon monoxide is the easiest thing to get to 0, right?
In fact, you don't even need all you need is the dueling tornadoes, and without even the thunderstorm generator turned on. So the bubbler even running or disconnected, and it'll do that standing on its head. It'll just get rid of the carbon monoxide for about 20 minutes before the charge dissipates from the thunderstorm generator. But yeah, that's the easiest of it. Obviously, and this is another thing that which is 2 different things that we're doing, and they do, to some extent, conflict with each other. For example, the geometries that you would use to reduce to 0 the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, there's some playoff between then the power and the engine. We don't really fully understand that, but there is a concept that it seems to be that, for example, you have that longer 24-inch tube instead of the 2-inch tube. Maybe that gives it a little bit more power to the engine than the super stubby. Maybe that's got something to do with the fact that the 24-inch tube will keep acting, even if you disconnect the bubbler. It'll keep increasing the amount of oxygen and decrease the amount of hydrocarbon, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, even though it's disconnected. But it'll do that for, say, 20 minutes, whereas the sort of super stubby 2-inch, probably less than 5 minutes. So there is a concept that there's some relationship between the interaction, if you like, of the plasmoids and the gas, which is only common sense, I suppose. If you have more effective interaction time, that's maybe the playoff that's happening. So, but I think the super stubby at the moment, from the test work we've done, and there's another 3 elements that I haven't disclosed yet. We're going to be going through the patent process. I have been working on patents for that as well, but there are another 3 elements to the thunderstorm generator that I deliberately didn't want to expose until we had a public face. So comes with publicity, comes safety, keeping public and keeping on the radar is a safety measure. And so at the Cosmic Summit this year in North Carolina, I will be disclosing really what I'm really doing.
Okay, well, thank you. And if you want to get your tickets, go to bit.ly/Cosmic Summit. All right. So Philip Milholland says, close the loop is the ultimate proof. I could not agree more. I absolutely agree with that. Totally. So there's a question here. Is there an ideal alloy? This is from Mad McCallum. Is there an ideal alloy other than stainless steel that would allow prolonged resistance to degradation over extended period of use? I think we've established that probably this won't be an issue when the actual mechanical and differential thermal expansion issues are fixed, which they appear to be doing. I don't think there's a problem because you've adjusted the thickness on stuff. Although there is a consideration to use Inconel to raise the temperature and see how that affects the performance. So that is one thing under discussion as far as I understand it. And then if you do use Inconel, that raises up the potential to use direct laser metal sintering. And we discussed that this week for producing iterations of the device. And so those things are going to be looked into. I don't really think I don't think you need different alloys other than the ones you're using in order for long-term use. That's where you're at right now.
Well, 304's got the best characteristics for spinning and for operation. I think that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and also, I would say that when we had more time to do it, because remember the Northern Lane thing was pretty rushed, the 24-inch spheres there. But there were expansion joints on if you go to Australia, there's 2 current of those piping, and they have expansion joints. And also in the original Australian models, we had the exhaust gas returning in the opposite direction with a swirl guide. So it'd be colliding again back in the opposite direction. So we had sort of really 3 directions of movement. Yeah. The internal one going sort of north-south, if you like, and the other one's going south-north. But anyway, so they're equal and opposite, but we did have a return 12-inch pipe coming back to the sphere, and that's why we had the expansion joints.
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to be an issue with the new configuration, as far as I understand it. So,
no, small enough.
Yeah,
no, it's small enough.
So Daniel's Scott,
and also
yeah.
Okay. And also with the vibration. Yeah.
Daniel Stott said, does the device give off any form of radiation? It gives off thermal photons, definitely. It may give off some electromagnetic radiation when these structures blow up, probably minor EMPs. But if there's iron around it, that should be largely fixed. If it's overdriven, which Malcolm talked about, he down-rated the thing so it doesn't have the coherent matter traveling waves coming out of the device and going back in. So I haven't seen any of those, much to my disappointment.
It's only my selfishness about trying to keep them inside.
Yeah, no.
I don't want to be.
I'd really like to see them,
Malcolm.
Malcolm. I'd really like to see them.
Okay. Well, what I have actually. This is an announcement. This is a scoop. I have instructed the welder specifically for you to produce the 1-inch OD and a 1/2-inch OD, which gives you 3/8, and that will then when I go back to the Maldives next time, you're quite welcome to go to London and go for it.
Yeah, I would love to capture those with beautiful res, like we were able to do with Henk Uren and
we will.
Yeah,
we will.
I want to say thank you to Matthew Reynolds, who's bought you and I a coffee, Malcolm, on YouTube. so he's given a super chat. So okay, so is anyone in the chat wanting to ask a question in the Zoom meeting? If you want, do raise your hand, please. I'm going to take more questions from YouTube now. Okay, so Okay, I see a discussion. I don't see a queue. I'm not looking at things that haven't got a queue next to them. So I don't see a queue, don't see a queue, don't see a queue. Okay. All right. So there's no queue there. All right. So I'm going to answer a question that was asked earlier by one Corky Goss. So he says, Bob, can you discuss exotic vacuum objects as a root cause for consciousness? An easy one. I don't think exotic vacuum objects are the root cause for consciousness. I think exotic vacuum objects are a manifestation of the same kind of fractal toroidal current structures that consciousness operates with. So, as I said before, well, I'll go back to the group here. The brain has vortex and anti-vortex in conscious cognitive states. This was suspected by me, but it was proven by Sydney Technical University using functional magnetic resonance imaging last year and published on June the 15th, 2023. And this means it will be producing a toroidal moment. And I believe that that allows interaction with the Akashic field. It allows sixth sense operations, remote viewing. It allows for people who've desired to become entangled through the real love to be able to share information, people that are in the same bloodline, brothers and sisters and parents and even people that are not with us anymore, to be able to share information. And so I think that the Evos themselves, because they are of this fractal toroidal nature, that you can become able to control them or manipulate them or sense what they're doing to a degree. And I think in part that's how John Hutchison was able to interact or understand that his samples were getting to the point of doing some funky business. And I think this is exactly how spoon bending was able to be occurred by Jack Houck in the psychokinetic parties. And this could be taught to people. And I think what it is we know that exotic vacuum objects are emitted from our fingers, okay? Ken Shoulders was very clear about this. Obviously, it's more obvious when you've got a spark coming from your finger, but I think they're coming out all of the time. And when you put that into a metal, and these things like to go into metal, the ones that are coming out of your fingers are consciously entangled with your own spirit, let's say. And so they are more easily able to be manipulated by you as the conscious person that emitted them, and when they got stored into the material. So you're able to manipulate their actions such that maybe you can spin them up or get them to aggregate so that they can bring in more energy from the ether and change the way the electrons are able to bind in the between the crystals in the metal and softening that metal bond, which is weak anyway between crystals relative to the metal bond in the bulk of a crystal, single crystal, and allow for the spoon bending process to occur. And the same process would be going on when you're doing laying on the hands for healing. It would be the same thing when people join hands in church and they all share an intention. You're sharing your own exotic vacuum objects and the collective exotic vacuum objects to create a particular outcome. So I think Malcolm's probably got some views on that kind of topic on consciousness and exotic vacuum objects. Would you like to share something, Malcolm?
Well, I'd just like to share the empirical evidence is that, dumb as a post before I went into the plasmoid thing, and not much better afterwards, only that I managed to do my model of the elements and build my machine. So.
Well, I think Malcolm thinks he's controlling the exotic vacuum objects. I think they're controlling him, but that's my view.
No, they're controlling me. I'm their ambassador, apparently. So
yeah.
I had to find someone smart enough to do it, but dumb enough to know it's not a good idea.
Very good. I think it's the Kordylewski clouds. You're literally a slave to their desires.
Correct.
Okay, Ken, do you want to step in and ask a question?
I see. Hey, Phil. Hey, Phil Dubois is here.
Hi, Phil.
Good on you, Phil. Yeah, hero of the moment.
The T-shirts arrived, by the way.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Ken, your question, please. Your audio, your mic's off at the moment, or I'm not seeing it, not hearing it. Okay, do you want to come back when you... Okay, do you want to write the question down the bottom and I'll ask it? Put it in the chat, please.
Yeah, Ken, your microphone's off. Can you practice it, Ken?
It's off now, but it was on earlier, but we still didn't hear him. Okay, let's see if you can write the question and I can ask it. Okay, I'm going to... Phil, do you want to give us an update? What's happened over on the other side of the pond whilst I look for questions in the YouTube chat?
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Great. Yeah, so I've been running the system for the last week in North Carolina. We wanted to get out in front of this build for the Cosmic Summit Conference that is coming up in a little less than 2 months. So I came here to actually get a hold of the original machine that we built in Albuquerque, where it all began in America. The crappy wooden frame that I built for it on the fly.
Bloody carpenters, yeah.
2x4s and a hacksaw. So it feels complete. You know, we have come full circle back to the original machine, and the results have been very strong. You know, I've spent a lot of time tinkering with this thing in India over the last 4 months, so I really know how to get them dialed in at this point. And you know, it's basically putting out what we would consider to be perfect numbers, being around 20% O2, no real carbon to speak of, CO down to like 20 ppm. I mean, ludicrously low numbers, under 0.1% CO2. So, you know, I mean, there's still work that needs to be done. There's still, from my perspective, there's still to totally conclusively put this to bed. There's still things that need to be done. But you know, all the work that's been coming out, and then, you know, especially everything you've been finding, Bob, it's painting a very compelling picture at this point, is what I would say.
I mean, I have the resolution, and I've aired it a lot. It could be an artifact of the type of devices that are used to measure gas coming out of an engine and the particular aspects of the system that are somehow interfering with it. These things will be resolved in reasonably short order by people using mass spectrometers, process mass spectrometers. So we'll understand that, and I know at least one person that you're taking a thunderstorm or have already got it will be able to do that. Maybe 2 people, and you know, but I still won't believe your guys because they're not my guys. So
I don't believe anyone. That's why I'm doing it myself. I don't believe anyone.
I told the story about how you cut a sample and brought it, and you had control of it the whole way earlier. With,
exactly.
With your balls.
No variables.
Chain of custody to
exactly.
Custody
so
to the US to the parties.
Yeah, so we now have a few units spread out to very competent parties throughout the US. So you know, hopefully, like I said, the data that people have been asking for can finally be produced. I mean, there aren't a ton of questions that people are asking. Basically, they want the mass energy balance. They want water analysis done on the bubbler. Okay, you know, that's not going to be extremely difficult to produce these things. So
I think at the conference, when you do a test, or Malcolm does a test, it's your bag. That's nothing to do with me. But you know, you can ask someone in the audience to bring a sealed bottle of mineral water and put that in. Yeah. So.
Yep. So that's that. But you know, the thought I keep coming to is where, you know, we don't want to pop the cork yet, you know, just generally, especially in any revolutionary technology, you want to kind of temper expectations and excitement, and you want to move methodically. But at this point, and you know, to me, those unanswered questions are about, you know, exactly what the work being produced is. But the fact that we're seeing these structures in there at all, to me, it's kind of already a win. To have a system devised that that will produce these structures. I mean, if nothing else, if
it's interesting science.
Nothing else. It gives you a platform from which to study these structures.
Yeah.
Right. To produce them en masse consistently.
Yeah.
And cheaply.
And I suspect that if they really are FeO2, this new phase, magnetic phase of iron, which is higher oxidation state than any other oxidation state of iron, which is normal. The highest previous one was Fe2O3. FeO2 has been researched by the Department of Energy for catalytically splitting water in sunlight. So I am suggesting that if we can produce these things en masse and then extract them, we may be able to use them to use solar catalytic splitting of water. So
I got a very good comment in chat here. We need thousands of fills. Thank you, Corky. I agree. There's only one, unfortunately.
As long as he's not
only
eating
be
at
one.
your buffet.
Tens of billions, because to take the pressure off. It's all on Phil at the moment. Yeah, that's how it feels now.
It's all his fault. So I've got a question here. Hey Malcolm, one of Stanley Meyer's first gas projects was an attachment to the carburetor that vaporized the gas. Is that what the bubbler does to the? No, it doesn't. But that's what we were suggesting earlier. Is that we actually inject the fuel at after the bubbler, but inject it into the Vortex stream, and maybe that will improve the efficiency. But it's a thing to do with prototypes down the line. So S23 says, that was WP for Truth. Thank you for your question, WP for Truth. S23 says, question, how is this thing being received by the powers that be? And or do they already have this information technology? Malcolm.
Absolutely, they have it, and they've had it for 65 years. They've had it for 3,000 years. They've had it for 150,000 years. Somehow, someone, somewhere, through time, space, has been quashing these fundamental force of nature. The most powerful in every religion and every culture in the world. This is the path, the most powerful machine in the universe. So the fact that it's being actively suppressed tells its own story. And then, in a way, I think our victory has been the goal, from my point of view, is really fundamentally not about the thunderstorm generator or direct matter to energy drive. It's about the awareness that plasmoids exist, Shamir exists, EVOs exist.
I think definitely. I don't think the genie can be put back in the bottle for people that are paying attention. But, we've only got 10,000 people on YouTube. And, I've known powers that be kill more than that in a couple of days. So it's just they are spread out all over the world. So
thanks, Bob.
It's going to be logistically very hard. Okay, so...
Yeah, Malcolm, we'll let you know if we see a laser moving across your forehead on the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I'm expecting lots of those. I maybe even got a mirror coat being made in readiness for the Cosmic Summit, just to reflect the lasers directly back.
I need to get them so they move defeat the Havana rays.
Sorry. Like I say, the first person I see with a tinfoil hat, specifically an aluminium foil hat, at the Cosmic Summit, I owe them a beer. And I think Phil said he was going to try and be the first person, but I think he's going to forget.
I'm showing up in a tinfoil suit, Bob.
I want to make the very obvious point here, and this is the most profound thing. So we have cranial ion spheres, and we have carbon in some form, being created. So basically, those are artifacts of a system. Yep. And so basically, my point and my thing and my notes are all about how I describe how to achieve that in my own way. Yeah. And deliberately trying to forget about all of the society wording and stuff and simply think in form and function without words. And I think that the existence of, and as I agree with Bob, we've come a long way in it since Randall Carlton outed me on the Joe Rogan show. Yep. So, because really, if you look at the amount of, I'd like someone to do this as someone techo, how many people mentioned plasmoids on the whole of the internet 2 years ago? And how many mentioned plasmoids today? Because I can tell you what, people in coffee shops, people in like supermarkets, I mean, I make the observation that there must be more views. I think Joe Rogan's probably 100 million. Certainly it's over 10 million views now. It's taken off again on the original 15-minute skit for where Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson are on with Joe Rogan, their 15-minute excerpt. But I think that it must be a lot more because it's generally known. And to me, the big breakthrough is, and I know Bob appreciates this as well because he put the paper out, there's other papers coming out supporting Bob's paper.
Well, I think they found the formula now. Just don't mention low-energy nuclear reactions at all.
What are they? We've just got EVOs.
Actually, so what's actually happened is day before yesterday, Giorgio Vassallo at the university in Italy, he has put out a paper that basically captures the Lockheed Martin patent, the Aronhof bomb effect, the work of Ken Shoulders, and so on. And you can look, it's like a who's who of the stuff that I've been mentioning since 2016. And I know that at least 2, maybe 3 of the people that he thanks at the end of the paper were in the room when I gave my first presentation on the toroidal moment in Assisi in Italy. One of them walked away with that presentation. And I know they've been fighting the European energy projects that are funded by the European Union to talk about these subjects. So I thank their courage in putting out that paper the day before yesterday. It goes into the maths that they think might be behind these various phenomena. And I can understand the extreme pressure that's under them by the people that are controlling both the US funds and the European funds, in my view, to avoid mentioning the project. And but the point is they're attacking the mass. Yesterday, I received from Australia another government-funded project. They also think that they have some mass to show the or to help explain the physical things that have been observed. The truth right here is nature cannot lie, and we've physically seen these things across many systems. Malcolm's is one. The wonderful SEM session I had the opportunity to do with Phil Dubois there actually shows this structure crashing in, making a tornadic chain, and then spilling parts of its guts and then crashing in again. And so there's a whole wonderful story there from the inside of the 24-inch thunderstorm. And there's going to be more SEMs to come, which I think are going to be quite inspirational in the coming days and weeks. So I just want to thank Vinna Isis for his $20 donation on YouTube. He says, so the army of Phil clones know who contributed first. So I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean there, Vanilla Isis, but thank you for your kind donation. That really helps. Okay, so
is he talking about like a genetic contribution? What does he mean?
I don't know. I think that's maybe what he's suggesting. Yeah.
Well, the clone army, isn't it?
Yeah, clone army just fills everywhere. The question is, will there be good drummers?
Well, if they're true clones, then they'll be the best drummers.
The best drummer ever.
Hey, I have a question, if I may.
Go for it.
Do you mind if I jump in with something, Bob?
No, go for it.
And this is, I missed a lot of, I don't know how specific the subject matter has been in this questionnaire about today's presentation or just things in general, but I've gotten this question from a number of people, and it's one that I've asked you in the past, and I know that you have touched on this, but I'm a little shaky on it, so maybe it'd be a good refresher certainly for me and maybe other people. What other processes are there that we know of that have the capacity to create iron-rich crenellated hollow microspheres? Other than that involve ball lightning, do we know of any other processes that can create these structures?
Well, ball lightning as a specific manifestation of extreme multi-axis hydrodynamic shear in a charge-separated environment. And by charge-separated, I also consider the ionic structure of water to be naturally charge-separated if you arrange them in a particular way, because you've got a more positive end and a more negative end. So you get charge separation even without full charge separation in water, and I think that's why it's so incredibly easy to create this effect in water. But no, if you melt spin, so for instance, when I was visiting a founding director of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project in southern France, he had a village near him where they have this very tall tower, and he was explaining what this tower was. And a lot of people think a raindrop is actually shaped in like the classic teardrop shape, but it's actually a sphere. And what they do is, in this huge tower, is they get a load of lead, they go up to the top of the tower, they melt it, and then they let it stream out of a small hole. And as it falls down the tower, it forms a sphere because you've got the minimum surface tension with the sphere. And then it solidifies into a sphere of lead. And that is how they made lead shot. Other people might know of the process that was revolutionary in bringing writing to large areas of the world. And that is the production of the ball in a ballpoint pen. And they take the metal, they put it through a very fast spinning nozzle, and it sprays out the metal horizontally. And those little metals come out, they form a sphere under the surface tension. It's a perfect little sphere, and it solidifies. In both of those cases, they are solid metal spheres. You've got a lead solid sphere, and you've got a steel solid sphere. Everyone is familiar with lead shot. Well, maybe not everyone, but everyone's used a ballpoint pen. They know that that is super duper spherical, okay? The difference between that and what Matsumoto observed is that Matsumoto observed a sphere, and out of that sphere came element. There, Malcolm's waving it in front of the camera. That is a lead sphere, and it has to be hollow because all of that synthesized element is coming out. And the volume of the carbon plume that's coming out of there is much bigger than the internal volume of that sphere. So it's more than interesting that it's a hollow sphere. It's actually not a hollow sphere. It's a coherent matter internal side of the sphere. In the 2003 patent of S.V. Adamenko, he showed a impact into his copper accretion disk, which was a hollow iron-rich crenellated sphere, which was cut in half. And in a 2005 interview, before the units were sent to, or investigated and then sent to the West, and then investigated in 2015 to 2017 and sent to Brookhaven National Laboratory to become part of the fusion program, having been verified. He said in this 2005 interview in a Kiev newspaper that he believed dark matter was in there. It was basically causing collapse of the matter and synthesis of new element inside this hollow cavity. This is exactly what Solin said in 1992. Magnetic charges come together, they produce hollow spheres and tubes in which nuclear reactions occur, the unification of the forces. So when we say hollow, it's hollow if it spews out all of the material that went in there, and but it does produce this hollow sphere. And normal melt processes don't produce these hollow spheres. So, you might have some thermite going on, right? Now, if a thermite is hot enough to produce molten metal that fires out, it will produce a sphere that won't be hollow. But if it's violent enough, thermite will actually create the charge-separated material that is violently enough hydrodynamic sheared. It might even create a iron-rich crenellated sphere. But you're going to get these things when a meteorite is coming into the atmosphere. It's going to be extreme plasma because of the interaction of the atmosphere with the metal in there. Often you get a Coulombic explosion going on, which leads to like an airburst type effect. And in those violent, extreme turbulence, plasma, charge-separated environments, you're going to get the formation of iron-rich crenellated spheres. But they're not necessarily as perfect as you get in these resonance systems like Binger and Huang's system, where we saw iron-rich crenellated spheres, and in Malcolm Bendall's system, where you literally have, in one case, pipes with a gap and the fluid going down with the turbulence in the fluid and the pulsing going on. And in Malcolm's system, you've got the pulsing from the engine, and you've got he's basically got pipes, but they're like a spherical pipe inside a spherical pipe, but the fluid is moving within those pipes. So in those scenarios, you're getting standing waves, and the standing waves are, in my view, where you can get a resonant phenomena going on, which we have seen in simple ultra experiments and in something that I shared in my Azizi presentation in 2021 or 22, I can't remember right now, where someone did that in free air between a sonotrode and a solid metal with something like ethylene glycol. They actually saw the yin-yang forming at the standing wave nodes. So,
but with our spheres, Bob, a quadrillion crenulide iron spheres, in my opinion, cannot be wrong.
Well, I certainly wouldn't like to make them all by hand.
No, Phil did that. That's what Phil's been doing.
Yeah.
We're going to sell them, right?
Yeah.
This is our new business model. It's like I said before, people sell off stars to name after people, right? You'll never run out. We'll do the same thing with microspheres, right?
So I mean, this is the thing
price.
with the ballpoint pen making machine, the actual thing that makes the balls for the ballpoint pen, it literally makes millions of these things in seconds. So it's not impossible to make million spherical objects in seconds, right? This has been known for a long time, but they're not hollow, and they're not crenellated.
Are you saying that Malcolm should start a pen company?
Not with crenellated hollow spheres.
The crenulated things that have little buttons on them, yeah.
Oh, hey, when Malcolm just flashed his Matsumoto book, which of course everyone must buy. From Bob, all three of us here. Matsumoto. Oh, you see, Bob's got the cool one.
This is the original issue of 100, signed by Matsumoto.
Yeah, okay, show off.
You had to pull out the signed copy. Yeah, okay.
But
how come we haven't got that signature? I'm complaining to the editor. There should be a signature.
But
electronic signature on each one of these. We've been robbed.
I was flipping through it the other day, and what I had not seen previously in the Matsumoto book was specifically this guy right here.
Oh yeah.
And of course, that's a little too bright there. We see that?
Yeah.
Right. And what does that look like? That was in the Cosmic Egg video that we saw.
Oh yeah.
Right? Where you had that honeycomb structure inside of the hollow microsphere. And so there you go. There's precedent for that one as well. I had not seen any instances of that before.
I'm hoping to get to him in June or early July, out to the family rather. And I'm hoping, because I have seen that in the presentation that we published on the MFMP's YouTube site, where he first, and the only presentation he gave that I think is recorded on this material, he actually had OHP slides that he put on an overhead projector. What's going on? I didn't do that. Why have I got things going?
You're celebrating. But
I'm going like this. Is that what happens? It's doing it for me.
Is it your birthday? What just happened?
I don't know what happened then. That's very weird. Loads of plasmoids around me.
That's my joke. They're very playful. If you look at the ancient records 3,000 years ago, they're very mischievous imps, these little plasmoids.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping to basically get much better visuals and remaster the book, because I've worked with my good friend in New Zealand, who I've forgotten his name. I'm very sorry at the moment. Getting tired now.
Bob, just to make it clear, though, with that thing, the definitive statement, I think, is that there is no other credible explanation for my quadrillion microspheres.
Well, certainly for the 129 million observable iron-rich crenellated spheres, because the smaller ones, the 5 micron ones, they don't really show the crenellations, and they can be silicon as well. So for the 129 million which is an estimate based on a 30 micrometer distance between the ones in a regular array of a 24-inch sphere, assuming it covers the whole volume. I don't think there's any reasonable explanation other than this process going on.
Well, and the other thing about that is that, you know, where previously we're observing these structures in the outer exhaust portion of the thunderstorm generator, you could say, okay, well, you know, it's going through this combustion process. There's carbon in there. There's extreme temperatures. You know, who knows? Maybe some process can, from the heat or whatever, can form these structures. But we cut open the inside of the inside, right?
Yeah.
There's no carbon in there. There's no combustion. It's just water vapor passing up through this, and we found them everywhere.
Yeah,
they're actually more frequent, it seems.
Well, they're easier to observe because they're not covered up with crud.
Yeah,
it's like the DHX2 reactor of Binder and Huang. It's easier to find the structures because it only ran for a short bit of time before it fell apart.
Right. So I don't know, you know, again, I don't know where you get them at all in any other system, but I certainly don't know where you get them from water vapor. That seems unlikely to me.
Yeah. Well, you get them in Binder and Huang's system that's only water in there, in theory.
but he's creating Evos, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point. Like it's would be shocking if there was some other process accounting for these.
But
iron
that
spheres.
comes to the recent results, and it was good that big shout out to George Lush to bring his temperature gauge down there and stick it into the super stubby there, and get an actual temperature reading off the inside sphere that I've already seen the purple haze around with and even the hash pattern with north, south, east, west. I saw that, you could see that in the photograph, but we didn't know the temperature. We knew it was high because it was red, but now we do have a number on that. It's between 520 and 540 degrees C on the bottom sphere, inside sphere, whereas the outside's only 160 to 200, Phil.
Right.
We have that as an absolute now, with a aerospace industry calibrated, George Lush N-type, thermocouple, absolutely space, like top of the game scientific instrument and top of the game probe. And so that's an absolute number, which is, just for the audience, the normal temperature of the exhaust measured throughout the world is around between 240 and 260 degrees C. You're talking about 540, double on the second sphere that has water in its gas phase going in.
Yeah, that's very useful for flashing it to steam. So we got Corky says microgranulated gold beads in ancient jewelry. Yes, if you go to the British Museum, you will see it, many artifacts going back thousands of years even, with incredible amounts of these tiny little gold spheres that were likely produced in a similar way as the lead shot and ballpoint pen spheres that I talked about earlier. In fact, if the first thing you see as you walk into the National Museum in Helsinki is basically an Uberos type snake piece of jewelry, where well, not quite an Uberos, but it's a snake necklace, and it has these wonderful gold beads on there. So thank you, Corky, for that comment. So we've got some more questions here. Kuki Couture says, how do we get our hands on a test unit? I think they're all spoken for now at the moment, but what we have said that when these test units go out to parties, they will have a window in which to perform tests, and if they don't, then they will be required to pass them on to the next person that's willing to do that kind of
hold
testing.
on, Bob. Hold on, because I have an extra one, and so start the bidding war.
Just keep that
everyone.
quiet between you and me.
No, you don't. You don't.
No, all right, I'm taking offers.
So Phil Dewars doing an auction now. So if anyone wants to bid on that one,
you missed Bob's speech about his guy in California. Yeah.
Apparently, it's been driven there. It's been spoken for, Phil. But like, if you can't work with it,
I've even got a Rory on a secret assignment. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's not secret if you're talking about it here, Malcolm.
Right. No one knows where he's going yet.
Good.
And when?
Right. So,
Apparently it's
someone
Fox-
says,
Fox 420.
Elliot says, without revealing too much, I'm working with a well-published individual from MOT and have potentially discovered something significant. It needs testing. Are inner outer sphere samples still available? Yes, I think, Elliot, there are samples available. There's already some in the US. Yeah, Malcolm's got some in his hand. I've got a whole load under the desk here, which I haven't scraped every single piece of detritus off it yet. Yeah, Malcolm's got some. There you go. Apparently going to Australia. He thinks he's in Australia, but it's not.
I just more disinformation, the better.
So, Phil, do you have some
I'm in
samples that you
Australia.
could send
I'm in
to
Australia.
MIT?
Yeah,
Australia.
I do.
Okay, so
I do have some. Well, I'm going to be going back to Boston soon, so I can hand deliver them.
yeah, so Phil is
Yeah,
actually
so-
from. Yes, Malcolm. I think it's closer with Phil if he goes back to Boston. So, thank you, Malcolm. They do look like that though. Phil samples, and the same ones I've got on the desk over here. I'm not going to wave them around. Someone might. They are there still.
Yeah,
Yes, they are.
Yeah, whoever asked that question,
It's Elliot. So Elliot, if you could reach out on remoteview.icu, send a private message if you subscribe if you haven't already, and then send me an address, and then say who it is that's going to get them. All we ask is that we'll have a basic Elliot sample transfer agreement. And essentially what it is, this sample is being sent to you on the understanding that you will test it, that you will say what you're going to do to test it beforehand, and that you will publish the raw data that you find. Okay, so along with any potential conclusion. So those are the kind of material transfer agreements that are standard.
And Bob, it's good to point out there's two things that we would like. There's the isotope work. Yep.
Yeah. It would be interesting if
on
someone
that,
has the ability.
And the ESCM work.
Yeah. So if someone has a secondary ion mass spectrometer and they can use some micro tweezers to extract a few of the iron-rich crenellated spheres, I'd be very interested to understand if there's a non-natural isotope ratio of the iron spheres, whether they are like we see that it's forming silicon from isotopes of carbon and oxygen. If you take two silicon 28s, that's not going to make iron 56. So you have to kind of like have heavier isotopes of oxygen in play or carbon in play to make the iron 56. Obviously, iron 56 is the most common iron isotope. So is there a non-natural ratio of iron 56, 57, 54 going on? Those are the kind of questions that would be really great to answer if someone has ICP-MS, secondary ion mass spectrometer. Okay. So WP for Truth says, hey Malcolm, in the transmutation process inside your reactor, can you manifest what elements are created by choice by controlling what elements you use in the process? Yeah. That's an idea. Just throw in some rubbish and see what comes out the other end.
Well, apparently it works for the flux capacitor for Back to the Future.
Well, it certainly seems to work in the Vachaev experiments. But in Vachaev experiments, they took dirty water or dirty gas and they were able to create lots of different metals.
I think where this is headed to, well, I don't think, I know, because we've done experiments a lot further advanced than what we're talking about now, but we're just keeping to the basic simple thing of using water in the bubbler. But as Bob said, we did test work 8 years ago and 5 years ago, 4 years ago. We've done test works here in London on exotic materials, put that way, in the bubbler. And we intend with 3 new models to specifically run a program for exactly that purpose, because we have found with tip leachate that's in my notes that people can read, that there was changes over time, like 1 minute. So we did it 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, and had our standard. There were definitely molecular changes over time with the bubbler, and there were actually also atomic reconstruction. there were elements there that appearing, and there was compounds appearing and disappearing, and elements appearing and disappearing. So,
I mean, more work needs to be done on that. That was the observation with the tests that were done. Obviously, you have water coming through a pressure drop through something like this fish tank filter, and so as you come through the pressure drop, you'll produce cavitation bubbles, and that was shown by Leclerc to cause transmutation. Obviously, it's also got some pan scrubs or whatever in there, and they will cause shearing and hydrodynamic shear, and that was also shown by Leclerc to do transmutation. So there's a reasonable expectation that some transmutation has gone on in the bubbler if other authors' work is to be believed. Now, Cloxy says, how were the plasmoids EVUs introduced into the Paul Pantone Geek reactor? Was there any UV light? In the Paul Pantone reactor, there was bubbling going on in the bubbler, not to necessarily the same degree as in Malcolm's device, but that doesn't matter because it was going in and producing a vortex, which is and in the similar kind of heat transfer. You will get some flashing to steam, so you will get multi-phase charge separation and multi-axis hydrodynamic shear. So the plasmoids, exotic vacuum objects, will be synthesized in the GEET rod. Okay, so that's that done. It's just not as easy, it would appear, to get a working device as it seems to be with the Thunderstorm generator. So Paul Holland says, are the spheres quenched before welding together, or is the whole TSG quenched at the same time? Well, it's a bit of a lengthy process, right? There's annealing going on and gas impregnation and stuff after the initial welding is done, right, Malcolm? So
it would be pressure, like we take it through. The ideal situation is simply a three-step process. You get your the space industry standard, that's in grade stainless steel 304. You then anneal it. You then spin it as a half sphere, hot spin. Then you weld you cut and weld your materials together. So you spin it in a half sphere, then you anneal it again, and then you weld it together again. And when it's welded together, then you put it back and anneal it again. The point being is that you get a 30 times the life using that process than you would otherwise. But the main point is that plasmoids like square houses, and any stress in the matrix is going to bend it, and that does not give a center. You need a center. As NASA doesn't want to talk about cold fusion, they talk about lattice confined. What is it? Lattice confined. What's the words they use? Lattice confined. Something or other.
Fusion, probably.
Anyway, fusion. So lattice confined. So the point is, so in the process, if you have perfect squares, the plasmoid will sit in the center of that perfect sphere. So someone's got their mic on.
That's right, I killed it.
Okay, so basically the in the middle of those perfect spheres is where this plasmoid will sit, because you've got 8 planes, so 6 planes, and if they're all perfectly square, it'll radiate the energy to the center, and that's what plasmoids like as their home. So and that's what you have to achieve with that, and we quench it with argon under pressure. So we have a vacuum annealing process that's quenched by argon gas. That puts in that matrix argon, which, like a normal neon light, will while it's charging, will expand, and when the orbits, and then when the charge goes off it, like the exhaust valve shuts, then it'll collapse and give off photons and energy at exactly the same time that the other valve is opened and let in the water in its gas phase and the plasmoids. And I think that is an integral part of this process, because it's a mechanism by which it's not so much, well, it is important you're infusing it with argon that can actually store and discharge in the perfect timing of the engine. And that's why you have to get the revs matched to the amount of flow coming through, which is very important. But the most important thing is that you've got the quenching happening to try and again achieve that perfect, the liquid argon, that perfect square structure.
Yeah, and it is about getting the resonance of these systems right. And I remember Dr. Roy Shinamaza tweaking the frequency and the level of the water in his vibrator system. He says it needs to be right, otherwise it won't work. And you see a lot of this going on. Now, I've got one question. This is specifically for you, Malcolm, by Cosmic. It says, Malcolm once said that the heart creates plasmoids. Can you please expand on that?
Yeah, one of my first revelations, and this is about, will explain people's intuition and the fact that, often you talk about two brains, the heart being one brain and the head being the other brain. Yeah. So basically, the heart, the geometry of the heart was an inspiration for the development of the Evas, because that's a left and right hand spin, male and female, clockwise and anti-clockwise. So the heart's design is specifically two spiral muscles, one imploding and one exploding. That is that there's a sheath in between them. So in fact, your heart is dueling tornadoes, one to do compression and one to do expansion. So basically what you have is, when the blood is pulled in, you create a vacuum, and that vacuum expands the gases in the blood. And then when the heart contracts, that collapses those bubbles, and you have multi-axis shear, and you're going through, the valve there. So basically, when that is pressured and it collapses, it does produce plasmoids. Your blood corpuscles are actually plasmoids. If it's like God's put his fingerprints on it, and you had a sphere and he pushed them together and squeezed them, and that's exactly the shape of a blood corpuscle. It's a torus. It's an imploded torus. Why is it a torus? Well, because it's the home to, in my economy, every blood corpuscle will have a central 0 point that is a plasmoid, that is generated by the heart. And so I think the amount of plasmoids in the blood, that's why I was so gung-ho about going into a Guy Belinsky's machine every 3 days and infusing myself with plasmoids, bringing my blood up to 250,000 volts every 3 days, so that I could get a population of plasmoids inside myself, which is just accelerating the normal process, so that then, you could get enough, a bigger area to hear the universe. That's how I view it.
Fantastic. Thanks for answering that question. I hope that it would appear that that answers your question, Cosmic. Great. So, Lithnik, you wanted to ask another question. Go for it.
Yes. If you use a bigger bubbler to generate more plasmoids, could that make the motor run more efficient or prime the system faster?
Well, I think that that's a good question. I think there's a lot more work to be done on that. What I'd say is that, and I think there's two aspects. I think Bob sort of normally talks about the fact that having different size bubbles probably creates more, chaotic stuff going on. If you take the Japanese
adiabatic
work,
compression is the pressures created with smaller bubbles. They go up an order of magnitude as the size of the bubble goes down. But there is a lower limit as well as an upper limit. So you need to work within certain limits to get the right size bubbles and the right rate of collapse.
It's the bubbles you can't see that are doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's why I think in the Japan, the name escapes me, Mosagas,
Russian
yeah,
Amazo.
mass of gas. Yeah, so that, and I did some things about that with some stainless steel flippers, and then I used some actual flippers that were actually grated cheese boards. So you'd have the, so it would can go through with less resistance on the flapper. I think the ultimate is that you have a flapper that you cannot see any bubbles, or it's ultrasonic generation. I think there's lots of ways to do it. I kept it simple.
There was a patent that was awarded in the US where they actually replaced the low frequency vibration on the vanes in his patent with an ultrasound actuator, and they got awarded as well, which I think annoyed Amaza. And the original patent for producing the gas actually has holes in the round holes in the vibrated plates. So yeah, he's.
Yeah. But the thing is, you can't see, to my knowledge, or you can't see. It's not like you have the big bubbles. You can't see them, and you don't want to see them. If you can't see the bubbles, you're winning, in my opinion, because you need symmetrical collapse. And the trouble is this: you have to get down to small enough that they're traveling in the flow. They're not part of the flow. They're small enough, and they collapse, not to have that shear on them. So, because they have to collapse symmetrically in a perfect sphere to apply the pressure into the center. As per, I would instruct people to look at the paper, which I think is the most important paper in the world in relation to this topic, is the mathematical paper by Oppenheimer and Schneider, talking about the formulas calculating the force that can be generated from an imploding sphere. Yeah. So, but
and also the work of Teliakin is very important.
Yeah.
In this.
So anyway, microspheres collapsing symmetrically is what we're trying to achieve. Yeah.
Okay, so we have another question. So if light, this is by Brajboy 2004, says, question, so if light is sound through the ether, then is consciousness energy sound through 3D matter space time? Maybe you could rephrase that, Brajboy. I'll see if I can pick another one here. So
just read that again. I'll just remain confused.
Yeah, so you can remain confused. I might have lost it. No, I mean, I don't mean I've lost it. That's already taken for granted. But I mean, I've lost the question. So makes me think you can. No, I've lost it. Maybe he'll ask it in a different way. So Cloxy says, please consider creating a reactor by twisting two pipes together.
I think what he's saying is, I think you're saying. Lucky we got a patent application last week. You've just gone off of it there.
Okay, there's a bit of lag on
Can anyone hear me?
There's a bit of lag. I can hear you, but it's a bit of lag.
So can anyone hear me?
Yeah. Okay, Malcolm, I think we've got a bit of lag there, so I'll take the reins for now. I'm going to mute you right now. Tammy says, what paper did you say was important? I think it was Nature and another paper in 2001 by Teliakin on cavitation. His career was destroyed by the US Navy disinformation group, as far as I can understand. You can go and look at Stephen Krivett's report of that whole sorry affair on his website, New Energy Times. That should be enough to get you there. Okay. So Braj Boy's got a thing here. He says, so this makes me think you can measure specific medical health telemetry to give measurable strength to someone's natural plasmoid production. Yes, I guess maybe you could. Cymatics has the mojo. Yes, quite possibly. Certainly, if people feel good with sound. You're back in the room, are you? I'll ask you to unmute. So there was a question here about from Cloxy saying, please consider creating a reactor by twisting 2 pipes together around a 3rd pipe or rod just against each other. Creates a helical flow path, but limited interface surface between the pipes. Okay. Okay. So Elliot just wanted to clarify that the research at MIT is not MIT sponsored, whatever that means, and he can't give more details. Okay, so we're out of questions there. Is there anyone in the Zoom call that wants to ask any questions or make comments? Anyone? If not, I will call time. It's 1:30 here in the morning. I know it's the start of Malcolm's day. Any questions? Any last questions? Good. And that either means you're bored or satisfied. So in that case, I will say thank you very much. Thank you, Malcolm, for joining on the call.
Never finishes, Bob.
Thank you, Phil. And yeah, thank you guys on YouTube. This was a Ask Me Anything would appear with Malcolm. So thank you, and I will see you in the next video. So shutting YouTube now. Bye-bye, guys. And thank you, everyone, for joining on the call. It was a real pleasure to have you here. Thanks for the questions in the chat. That was really useful to have that. Your chat questions were streamed also, so you can see them in the recording. So hopefully you didn't say anything you didn't want to be seen.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Cheers,
I just wanted to get back on and say thanks.
All
Really
right.
appreciate all the work.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Brian. Great to have you. Bye-bye now.